Well, hello, children. This is Grandpa Joe, and in this video, we're going to talk about abuse of a different kind. Um, we're going to talking about slave labor, basically. So, um, now I'm not going to complain too much because I do believe in hard work, and I believe it's important to teach your children to have a good work ethic. But there are limits to that. Okay. So, as a child growing up, as early as I think 7 or 8 years old, we had chores, me and my sister both, right? And nothing wrong with that, okay? The chores, no problem. Now, my chore was to make the beds. And when I say make the beds, that means I made all the beds. So I made my bed, my sister's bed, my mom and dad's bed. Okay? And when I was tall enough to pull out the trash, I took out the trash. And my sister washed the dishes. Now, I think she got the short end of the stick on that one because, I mean, that's 3 times a day washing the dishes. And I had to help out, quite a bit, but mine was usually, drying the dishes, rinsing and drying. So she would wash them and I would rinse them and, put them in the strainer, whatever. And nothing wrong with that. And of course, we helped out with household cleaning, right? So when it was cleaning day and mom was cleaning, we helped out, doing, I usually did the dusting, right? So I'd go around and wipe off all the furniture with Pledge, right? And while my mom was vacuuming, my sister, I can't remember what she did, but she was, everybody's working. She's picking up the clothes or whatever. And laundry day, we help fold the clothes, right? And I think that's important. Absolutely, that every kid should have that, right? Now, most kids got allowance. We did not get allowance. For whatever reason. We did get, when we were real small, we got money from the Tooth Fairy. But we never got any sort of weekly allowance or payment of any kind, and that continued up into adult life. Okay, so I never got paid for any of the work I did. None of it. Okay? So, right around 10 years old, I got the chore of mowing the lawn. Okay? And in one particular case, the first place that we had, it wasn't a big deal. It was a 1/4 acre lot. And we had other people that mowed that generally. But, every now and then I would mow. One of the things that my dad had me do, which was punitive, was we didn't have weed whackers back then, right? So you didn't have line trimmers. That wasn't invented yet. So the way you trimmed was like with hand shears. So they had these crappy, giant scissor things that absolutely did a terrible. They did the worst product ever. They were terrible, and basically had to go around by hand with these things and trim around the house, which was a nightmare. It's a blister making mess. But all right, mowing the yard when you're real small, it's a little hard. You're trying the mower bars up over your head basically, and 10, 11, 12, right around that area, we lived on a house that had a 2 acre freaking yard. Okay? So 12, 13 years old, I'm hand mowing this 2 acre yard. And there's no way you could do it in one day. And I only had Saturdays off. Sunday we went to church, right? So maybe after Sundays, church, maybe I would do something, but Sundays were pretty busy. So Saturday was about the only day you had to mow the lawn. And so it'd take me 2 or 3 days mowing the lawn. I worked on, during the after school, mow the lawn, trying to get this thing mowed. And sometimes we just gave up on it because of the rain. We did have a old piece of crap riding lawnmower that would sometimes work. And when that worked, it was like, oh, thank God, I don't have to, manually do this. But it still took like, 2 hours, even with the riding lawnmower, or longer, because it's a 2 acre yard. It's larger than a football field. And so anyway, that was a bit strenuous, okay? But that was just housework, okay? And even that, sometimes mowing that lawn out in the Florida sun, almost have heat stroke, right? Because this yard was a wide open space except for the very end. It had some trees, but you're out there in the blazing sun for, 4 hours with a push mower trying to mow this grass. It'll kill you. So that wasn't fun. But that wasn't, that was, like I said, that was just house chores, okay? But my dad would take me with him during summer vacation and weekends, would take me to work with him. And he pretty much expected me from a very early age to work just as hard as, or harder than the men that he had hired, right? So he had his business. He had, up to 5 guys working sometimes, so I'm out there working right along with him. And in some cases, it's just me and him. So, a lot of work. And, sometimes it was fun. Like, I don't know very many 11-year-olds that have ever had the chance to operate heavy equipment. But I got to, so here I am on a John Deere 544, I think, front end loader. This is a huge machine, right? And I'm out there digging lakes on Boca Grande Island, 11, 12-year-old kid. And you get a lot of looks when you're driving through this posh condominium, development, and all these Bentleys and Rolls Royce and all these, high-priced cars, and you're flying through on this this little kid flying through the parking lot in this giant loader. You get a lot of disconcerted looks. And people wonder, what is this kid doing on this loader, But, so sometimes that was pretty cool, right? But most of it was just hard labor, okay? Really strenuous. And it's, this isn't work that a 10, 11, 12-year-old kid should be doing, okay? Not to the extent that it was, forced on me. And, we're out there. Boca Grande was white sandy beaches. And so it's blinding sands. And actually, you had a real problem because it's so reflective that you'd get sunburned eyes from all the glare. It was pretty rough. But I mean, that's just the way it was. On the weekends, not every weekend, but a lot of weekends, I'd go with my dad to work and get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and leave before 6 to get out to the job site before sunrise. So really, really hard work from a very, very early age. And even then, I don't understand this, I for the life of me, but he was super, super cheap with me, didn't want to feed me. So my lunch, and this was every time, okay, this was every lunch that I've ever remember, except when I was maybe older. Occasionally he would bring like a hamburger or something, right? But my lunch consisted of a can of Vienna sausages. So it's a little bitty can with like minced meat sausages in it, and some crackers, and the cheapest soda that he could find. Right. So if I got soda, it was the cheapest one he could find, and usually it was just water from the cooler, right? So this is the way things would go. We'd be out working, and then he would leave and come back with these Vienna sausages, right? And or he'd have them with him maybe. So from he already had gotten them earlier in the day. So everybody else would be working, and he'd send his no. Let me correct that. So he'd send everybody to lunch, and then we would stay on the job site, and I would eat my Vienna sausages and crackers, right, and drink the water. And then when everybody got back, okay, then I would return to work, and then he would leave. Now, I didn't know what he did. He just, so I got to go do something, right? But what he was doing is he would leave and he would go to lunch, right? So he would eat these Vienna sausages with me, which is no meal for a man, okay? My father was a 220-pound or more man, and, even though he mostly worked on the heavy equipment, there's no way that was a sufficient lunch for a full-grown man, and it certainly wasn't even enough for a 10, 11-year-old boy. So he would send me back to work with everybody else, and then he would take off and go to lunch. So just super cheap. And it's like he would buy himself a Pepsi, and then I would get the knockoff, Sam's Cola or whatever the cheapest thing was. If I got soda, that's what I would get. But generally speaking, it was water. He always had Pepsi. Okay, I don't remember him never not having Pepsi for lunch. That was his drink. And so, I just super cheap. Didn't want to spend more than $1.50 on lunch for me. Okay? And that was all the time. So, and he was constantly at work, pushing me, to overexert myself. Like we had stuff like, he did the same thing to my mom. In a lot of cases, he was in, prepared lots and stuff like that. And one of the things in a lot of places in Florida is they put in culverts. So there weren't ditches, all the water ran through these culverts. And so he did a lot of that, right? Placing culverts. And these were giant cement culverts that weighed, thousands of pounds, right? And he would use the equipment to lift them up and, put them in place. But you had to move these things around and guide them and wriggle them into place, okay? And so here I am as a little kid, and I'm, holding these culverts and try to push them around. And if something, went sideways, I'm down in a ditch, by the way, moving these things around, and these culverts are passing over top of my head. OSHA would have, shut down. He'd never work again if OSHA had happened to drive by there and see what was going on. Here's this, 10, 11-year-old, 12-year-old kid in a ditch with, these thousands of pounds culvert pipes and stuff. But way too heavy for me to be trying to deal with, and which makes it even more dangerous because first of all, I don't have experience doing this stuff, and I'd be trying to move these things around and shifting this, all this weight and trying to push them into place and get them to fit together, and it's just next to impossible. And it nearly killed my mom. The doctor, my mother was so wore out and overstrained by this that, she went to the doctor, because of the pain and stuff that she was, dealing with. And the doctor, she told the doctor what kind of stuff she was doing. He's like, "What? No." He said, "You can't do that. You're gonna kill yourself. You need to tell your husband that no, you can't do that kind of work. Okay, you're putting too much strain on your body, and it's you're hurting your internal so much. You're putting stress on your internal organs." And you're going to end up killing yourself. You can't do this. And so instead of her, she couldn't work anymore. So it was me, right? So he put me out there doing this stuff. So just, a nightmare, okay? And, so during his whole time as construction, so I'd say from 8 years old, from like 9 years old to 13, close to 14, I'd say 14, I worked construction with my dad, okay? Because this is the time that we were in Florida. So all the way up to my freshman year of high school, I worked construction with my dad every summer and a lot of weekends, okay? Aside from the chores around the house, the 2-acre yard that had to be mowed. So, really just put a strain on my young and developing body that, shouldn't have been. And, always pushing me to lift things and to do things that were, I just didn't have the strength to do, but he would push me to do this stuff. And, tearing muscles and stuff like that was commonplace, on the job site with the things that he would try to have me do. And it wasn't just, that was just long hours, we'd be there all day from like sun up to sundown, out there working. And with few breaks. And like I said, not a whole lot of food. So, really put a strain on my body, which has caused me a lot of problems now that I'm getting older. So, working construction from like 8 years old, because he took me with him early on, even if I wasn't doing anything, I was with him, riding on the equipment with him, he just for company's sake, right? So there's a lot of days that I didn't do any work, but I was sitting on this blaring loud machine with no hearing protection, all day long. And, dangerous. I'm sitting on these giant tractor wheels, and I'm sitting on the side, I don't know how many times I fell off that thing. Okay, well, he was working. So, dangerous. Shouldn't have happened. Just for his convenience sake and, so he didn't feel lonely. He put my life at risk so he wouldn't feel alone. But anyway, so we, as I said before in other videos, we sold all the equipment. So he's no longer in construction. And we moved to Georgia, okay? Now he doesn't have any equipment, and we're up there in North Carolina to start with, and then we're going to go to Georgia. So now, up there in North Carolina, in Georgia, everything is wood stoves, right? And everybody has a garden. So guess who got to work in the garden? Who got to do all the hoeing and all that kind of stuff? It was good old Joe, the one who's allergic to everything, right? So, you know, had to work in the garden. That wasn't horrible. But then you had the wood, right? So these wood stoves, which means that you had to have wood, and you had to have this wood split up. So here I am working with, I'm probably at this point, I'm 14 years old and learning to use an axe and what they call a go devil, which is a maul, which is a wide-headed axe used to split wood, right? That was the whole point. And so learn to split wood, and my job was to feed the stoves and to split the wood, right? And when we were in North Carolina, it was a nice house, and so it wasn't a big deal. Split a little bit of wood, no problem, and feed the stove. Wasn't that big a deal. And initially, he was helping because, I didn't know how to do anything. So until I got up to speed, he was helping out a bit. But, living in North Carolina was probably the easiest I had it. Okay, he wasn't working anywhere, so I didn't go on the job site with him. And all I did was do work in the garden, which was an itchy prospect, but, oh well. And then the rest was, splitting wood. And that wasn't too big a deal either. But then we moved to Georgia. And we moved into this piece of crap, as I said before, a log cabin that was boarded up. It snows inside the house, in the doorway between the kitchen with the wood stove and the living room with the wood stove. Okay, that's how bad it is. And you can literally see the light shining through the walls in this house, okay? No insulation whatsoever. So in the winter, we were running both of those stoves full blast to keep the water pipes from freezing in the house and to keep us from freezing to death. So that means that we put wood in those stoves every 3 hours. Before I went to bed at 9 o'clock, I put wood in the stove. I woke up at 12, put wood in the stove. Woke up at 3, put wood in the stove. Woke up at 6, put wood in the stove, got ready for school or whatever, right? So every 3 hours through the night, I had to wake up and put wood in both of those stoves, or at the very least check on them. So we are burning a tremendous amount of wood. And somebody has to split all of that. Somebody has to stack all that. So my new job was splitting and stacking and carrying wood, all day long. So we basically burnt a forest of trees. There's a shed. It was like a two-car garage, but it was for farm equipment is what it was. But we stacked that thing to the ceiling with wood. And then besides that, we had wood, 6 foot high, running down this fence row for about, 30 feet. So, and more wood coming in all the time. Okay, so we had the place where we lived, we had pulp wooders. So a couple of the guys that went to our church were pulp wooders. And when they were out in the woods, they would, cut one of these trees down. If it was, if they found a dead tree or whatever, they would cut that down and save it and bring it to us. And we had there's other people that were, constantly bringing us wood to try to stay warm in this crappy house. So, had to saw that stuff up had to split it and stack it up. Now, at this time, he started working again, right? So he went and got a backhoe that was on track. So it was a track hoe. Okay. So it's another case machine, but it's on tracks instead of wheels, because you had to have it up there in those mountains. It was, and also it was that, Georgia clay. So you really needed a track machine in order to do anything there. And so he's working again. So now I'm working with him, going to, do different jobs, as well as, maintaining the wood. So, and most of his jobs were running field drains for septic tanks. And so basically he'd use the backhoe to dig out the trenches, but it was my job to check the level and drive stakes for grade, and then we would pour in the gravel and then lay the pipe and then pour the gravel over top of the pipe. Well, you couldn't use the loader to the backhoe to do all this. So you could pour in the first layer of gravel pretty easy with the backhoe, or the loader bucket, whatever. But I was in the ditch shoveling and leveling out the gravel, right? And then when the pipes came in, when we laid the pipe, now you have to cover that with a shovel, because you have to keep the pipe in the center of the ditch, in order to pass inspection, right? So all that gravel over the pipe had to be done by hand, right? Which, that's what I got to do. So real familiar already with using shovels. So I was the workhorse, right? He stayed on the equipment. I was down in the ditch doing the work. And that's pretty much the way it was. So pretty strenuous work there, but not a whole lot of heavy lifting, so to speak, as far as that goes. But, pretty strenuous and labor intensive. And it's just me and him. And then he was working, building a road in the Natahela forest. Okay, so he rented this giant bulldozer, okay, in addition to the case backhoe, and hired some people. And we were cutting this road into this, forest, basically, right? I don't know if this was for homes or what it was for, but we were building this road. This is what he's contracted to do. And so here's these giant trees that we have to get, cut down and get rid of. And we took all of that. And he also had a small dump truck, like an automatic dump truck. So now we're loading up these giant trees and bringing them home. So these are trees that were like 3 foot across or bigger, gigantic trees, right? And they're all hardwood trees, not pine trees. Well, there are some pine trees that were in there, but we gave those away for pulpwood. You can't burn pine trees in your stove. So now we're pulling out these gigantic trees, and I didn't have to do much of the saw work. Because the guys that they'd hired did most of the chainsaw work. So I didn't have my hands on chainsaw very much. But my job was to split all these green. So these are green, just, cut down. They weren't dead trees. And so it's much harder working with a tree that's just been felled, right? So it hasn't been seasoned, hasn't been dried out. And those are much harder to deal with. So that was my job. And it is back-breaking, strenuous work. So you have to move these giant things around. So any one of these pieces of the tree was, up to 600 pounds. Okay, giant things full of water, right? And so I'm having to move all these things around up on a hill, okay, because there's mountains everywhere. So I'm maneuvering all this stuff around and splitting it up on the job site, because that's what he had me doing, right? Because what else is there for me to do, right? They're cutting a road with a bulldozer, okay? Not a whole lot of shovel work needed there. It was just, had those guys there were basically felling the trees and cutting them up. And, I did, of course, the brush and stuff like that, I would, move out of the way. And I don't know if we piled it up. I don't know if they burnt that or if they hauled it away, but basically piled all the brush up. Did a lot of that by hand. But he did the thing had a claw on it. So a lot of the work, he did with that. So I didn't have a whole lot of work as far as, dealing with the trees other than splitting the wood, right? But that was super strenuous. And then we, load these things up, put them in the dump truck. Whatever I split and whatever I didn't split would be loaded up in the dump truck. We'd take that home with us, pour it out into the yard, and I would spend, every day, when I wasn't in school, I was splitting this wood, right? Splitting and stacking. And pretty hard work, and got to the point that my hands, were so calloused that I couldn't close my hand. So I couldn't touch my fingertips to the palms of my hands because each of my fingers, every, joint was calloused, and then the pad of my hand was thick with calluses to the point that I could not touch my palm of my hand with my fingers. So, and basically, talk, and this is the kind of stuff they do for workouts now. If you see in the gym, the stuff that they do in the gym was stuff that I did, every day, splitting wood. And you see these guys throwing around these tires, flipping them over, when I was in construction in Florida, that was a commonplace thing for me to do, right? Changing tires on the equipment and working on heavy equipment, lifting huge parts and stuff like that. So, which brings to, so I got all this work. It was a big strain on my body, but it also made me incredibly strong. And I wasn't like muscle sized like a, weightlifter, anything, these power lifters or bodybuilders that you see. I didn't have gigantic muscles and stuff like that, but pretty super strong. It was like all day long work. It wasn't like a set that I would do and then rest. It was strenuous, tearing your muscles all day work. And so I was pretty good sized as far as chest area, upper body, right? And I always had big legs, but real dense muscle, and getting stronger and stronger all the time. And to give you an example, like when I was 13 or 14 years old, so we're still in Florida. The old equipment, the backhoe that my dad had two buckets. Had I think it was a 14-inch bucket, and then a 36-inch bucket. And a 36-inch bucket weighs 500 pounds. Okay? And at 13 or 14 years old, I could take that 36-inch bucket and pick it up by myself and put it in the back of my dad's truck. So this is an awkward shaped object, okay, and hard to get a grip on it. And at that young age, I could pick that 500-pound bucket up, steel bucket, and pick it up high enough to put in the back of my dad's pickup truck by myself. And so way stronger than an ordinary 13 or 14-year-old kid. And then as I got older, through high school, every day splitting this wood, lifting these giant logs, and moving them around, And then we bought this land for the church that we were clearing off, right? So every weekend I was out there working on that with this old man, right? So nobody wanted to go out there and work this property, right? We had pulpwooders that had the equipment to do it, but you couldn't get any of them to go out there and work on the property. Well, I have a family to feed. I have to do I have to work for myself. I can't work. Come out here at the church and do this work. I ain't got time. I have to take the weekends. I work. So I would go out on the weekend with this old man named Junior. Everybody called him Junior. And we would gather up all the pulpwood on the property. So he would do the cutting, he'd do the saw work, right? So he would cut down the tree, and I'd help him, guide it, push it to where we needed to go. And then he would, cut it up into logs, and then it was my job to drag them all out. So this is a 5-acre piece of property. And my job was to stick a pick in these things. So it's like a tool they use for moving logs. And basically you stick this into the log and to move it around. And it wasn't designed for hauling trees out to the road, but that's all we had. We didn't have a tractor and a log chain to pull these trees out. I did it by hand, and Junior, he couldn't do it, right? So he would run the saw and I would do the heavy lifting. So I'd pull these logs out and stack them up on the side of the road so that these guys who were pulpwooders could come later on and pick them up on their trucks with their equipment, make it easy for them so they didn't have to go back in and do the hard work, right? So, that was my life as a teenager. And like I said, it's continually getting stronger and stronger. And people thought that I lifted weights. Everybody, adults would always ask me, especially adult men, it's like, man, so where do you get them big old muscles like that? How do you, what kind of workout do you do? Do you lift weights? And I'm like, no, I don't lift weights. And he said, well, how'd you get them big muscles like that? And I was like, I'm just working, well, what kind of work do you do? It's like, I'm throwing around 600-pound logs and, stuff like that, splitting constantly every day. Yeah. I mean, it's look at my hands. I'm killing myself basically doing this work. So overworked, strenuous, hard work. And then we leave there, of course, and go back to Florida. And my dad gets into the trucking business. And it's my job to maintain the equipment. So that means I do all the oil changes. I do all the greasing and stuff like that. So every weekend, I'm crawling underneath these trucks, greasing them. Every couple weeks, we're changing the oil. So 30 gallons of oil, right? You basically drain these out into a giant, packing, like those Tupperware or plastic like totes, right, that you store stuff in. We'd use one of those to pour the oil in, right? And never any tools, okay? So he didn't do any of the work, so he didn't see the need to buy, the equipment to work on stuff. So I had that Go Devil that I used to use to split wood. I had a long screwdriver, flathead screwdriver. I had a ball peen hammer. I had a pair of giant channel lock pliers, and a set of sockets, and a couple other smaller pliers, right? And then to take the lugs off, they had a giant 1-inch drive socket and wrench with an extension. Okay, unfortunately, he didn't get the extension long enough, so it was always a pain in the butt trying to get the lugs loose, because you had to put the socket in at an angle to get it over the lug because the extension was too short. So now I'm working on these, trucks and all the heavy equipment there, with no tools. So, so that was every week. It was, maintenance as far as greasing and changing the oil. But then you also had cases where a seal would go bad in the truck. Like he had this old truck that was it's international, and it had Dalton style wheels on it, which were an absolute death trap. Okay, these were the worst. And those particular style of wheels were notorious for having leaky seals, right? So I'm not going to go into discussion on how all this works, but basically what that meant was you had to take the axle out of the take the axle out of the truck, right? And the both each had dual wheels, right? So these giant truck tires and wheels. So you had to pull these wheels off, take the axle out, and then you have this brake drum, which is this giant steel drum. You have to, and then pull that off, and then the wheel hub. So like you have the hub that holds the tires mounted to. This is built big steel chunk, right? And so all that stuff is super heavy, right? And so, at least once a month, we'd have a seal go bad, and I would have to do this kind of work, right? And even more frequently than that, really. There was always, a tire getting blown or something like that, which means you have to take the wheels off, right? And we didn't have impact drive ratchets or anything like that. We had a bottle jack that I used and to jack up the truck, and then everything was manual with this socket wrench. So, and you had to put a long pole on that in order to get enough leverage to break the lugs free. And sometimes I'd have my brother come out and help, and have him jump up and down on it, because these things would get over tightened. Because he would take these to the shop every now and then, and they put their giant air tools on it and over tighten them. And so when I wasn't around, he'd have to have somebody else work on it, right? And because I was going to college at the time, so when I was in school, he'd have to have some garage do it. But when I wasn't, I had to work on it. And most of the time we were working in either in our house, and he had this lot, this sand lot, that he would keep his trucks at, because our landlord finally got tired of it and said, I don't want you, you're keeping your trucks here, these greasy, oily, nasty things are destroying the yard, and you're killing all the grass and everything. So we had to move these trucks off to this sand lot, and I did work out there again with no tools. And now I'm out in Mulberry, which is a long way off, so I had to drive out there now to work on these trucks. But quite often, the drivers would drive these things off the road because they'd fall asleep, right? And break an axle. And so I'd have to go out 2 o'clock in the morning because these trucks drunk 24 hours a day, right? So I'd have to drive out in the middle of nowhere in the night, try to find this truck that was broke down on the side of the road and pull the axle out of it in a ditch. Nightmare scenario. Okay. And no light, mosquitoes just eating the crap out of me. Working with this heavy stuff with no tools. But that was what I had to do. And luckily, I was super strong, or I wouldn't have been able to do it at all. So, anyway, that was the kind of work that I did. Right, so I'm going to college and trying to study and stuff, and then night after night, spending hours out on the road fixing some truck because our drivers fell asleep, or something happened. They had a flat and ran off the road. So I'm out driving around fixing this stuff. And, I don't know where he's at. He's someplace else. But I'm out there working on his equipment, getting, fixed. And he wouldn't show up until the job was done, to make sure that, I wasn't taking too long or whatever. He's there to help push me along, which means he would go out there and kick me if I wasn't getting it done fast enough. So, not fun. And so, overworked, all this heavy stuff with no help, just worked to death. And so I was very happy when he left. I don't have to never work on another truck, and I haven't worked on another truck since. And all the strength and whatever I have now is what's left from all those years ago, because I haven't done any hard manual labor like that ever again. The most strenuous kind of stuff is working on my own cars or whatever. But that's about it. I've been taking it pretty easy, but my body has suffered tremendously. My shoulders are just completely destroyed. I mean, and my shoulders, my back, it's just, torturous. The short connective tissue is just damaged beyond repair. I've got carpal tunnel from all that strain. Not typing. I mean, I work typing, so I'm sure that doesn't help. But the damage is already done to my hands and arms, forearms, a long time ago, working. And so now, just constantly in pain all the time, every day. Wake up in pain, go to sleep in pain, rolling around in the bed in pain. Can't get comfortable because my shoulders are just will not stop aching. And I take pain pills and stuff to help, but it's sometimes the pain is just too much. But that was a kind of overworked lifestyle that I lived, constantly working, never a moment's rest, and never a dime. Okay. And during all this work that I'm doing, the abuse continues, right? So to give you an example, so when we were still living in Georgia, he my dad got a job working in Florida building this repairing power line grade. So he took his track machine, right, and took it down to Florida, and he was repairing the power line grade. So basically, you had these power lines that went through swamps, right? And you had to have a road so they could get out and maintain the power lines, and it would get washed out with hurricanes or just regular rain, right? Would wash parts of the road out, so they couldn't get out there to fix the power line grade. So my dad was hired to, go out and basically repair the road, and he had his equipment out there, and he did that. And he would take me with him when I was not in school, right? And so during the summers when I was off college, no rest for the wicked. So he would have me drive him down. Now, of course, he drove himself when I was in school, but whenever I was out of school, he would have me drive. So this is the routine. So Sunday night after church, because he was a pastor of this church still, we would get in the truck and I would drive straight through to Florida, 9 hours. Okay, so we'd get on the road probably around 10 o'clock at night. Okay, and we would get there like 7 in the morning. And I drove straight through. He didn't drive, not one time. So I drove us straight through. Oh, by the way, I had to prepare the truck before we left. So I had to pack it all up, get everything in it, and tie everything down, and get his clothes and my clothes and all that kind of stuff ready and put in the truck, and whatever the supplies that he wanted to take, I had to do all that, right? So I had to get the truck ready too. And then drive straight through. And then when we would get there, okay, I've driven all night. And then we would get to the work site, he would not allow me to go to sleep. So I wasn't allowed to go to sleep. He wanted me up and keeping him company, right? I was there to keep him company. I didn't do any work. There was no work for me to do. So I sat there and kept him company, got up on the machine and sitting there keeping him company. So I wasn't allowed to sleep. So Monday, I sit with him all day long, and then I get the rest Monday night, and that whole week like that. Okay, I have nothing to do. I'm sitting there most of the time, sitting on the tailgate of the truck, watching him repair this road. That was it. And then Friday night, after work, right? So he works all day Friday. I prepare the truck, get it ready to go, and then I drive straight through Friday night and arrive Saturday morning in Georgia. Don't get to sleep because, remember, we're in this shitty house that has 2 stoves, and somebody's got to split the wood, somebody has to stack the wood, and all that crap for the oncoming winter, right? So all day Saturday, I'm doing all the chores around that house. So I'm mowing the yard, I'm splitting the wood, I'm stacking the wood, I'm getting things, ready, right? So I'm working all day Saturday. And then Saturday night, I get to sleep. And then Sunday morning, it's church time, right? So get up, go to church, come home, and now it's time to prepare to leave. So I have to bring up wood on the porch for, my mom and sister so that, they can stay warm if it happens to get cool at night, right? So bringing wood up on the porch for them, and then preparing the truck to get ready to go so I can do the same thing over again. So that was basically my summers, was during that time was driving him and sitting there watching him. It was ridiculous. But talking about the abuse continuing. So on the drive, okay, he would be sleeping. So I'd be driving, he'd be sleeping. And anytime, I hit a reflector, or we went over a bridge or anything like that that jostled him awake, he would wake up and yell at me and kick the crap out of me. Like, kicking me in the side. So he's laying down with his legs on my lap the entire time I'm driving. His legs are on my lap. And so he would pull his leg back and kick me as hard as he can in the side while I'm driving, over and over again, like 5 or 6 times. What are you doing? I told you not to run on. You're waking me up. Yeah. And so I'm trying to drive while he's kicking the crap out of me, right? And, during each night, there was at least 2 or 3 times that he would wake up and kick the crap out of me. So, it just never ended. And like I said, finally we moved to Florida, and I'm working on these trucks, and it was the same thing. I'd be out there working on these trucks, killing myself, right? And I'm out in this sand lot that's infested with mosquitoes, and sometimes I have my brother out there, but most of the time not. But we're eaten up by mosquitoes while we're trying to, do this work, excruciating work. And it was so bad, okay, that there was a woman who lived in the house that was on the lot. She actually called the police and said that, hey, this guy is out here abusing his son. She could see what was going on. His son shouldn't be doing this kind of work. It's too dangerous, and he shouldn't be out here doing it. And of course, my brother was there too. So they got these 2 guys out here. They shouldn't be out here. He should be taking that to a garage or something. It's too dangerous. He was calling the cops. And the same thing, there was another woman that worked at this. He'd take his trucks to this used tire place, right? To get the tires placed. She saw the same thing. I'm out there. He would have me, because he didn't want to pay them, right? So he would have them put the tires on the rim, and then he would have me mount the tires because he didn't want to pay for mounting, right? Now, I don't know if she called the cops because she felt she was getting robbed because she wasn't being paid for mounting, or if, she was genuinely upset that my dad was making me do this kind of work. The way that I was doing it was dangerous, and, because I didn't have the proper tools, right? And these Dalton-style wheels, people got killed. One of her guys got killed by these Dalton-style wheels, okay? They were nothing to play with. And it's like, and if I wasn't moving fast enough, there his foot would be, up my rear, or, slapping me in the head and the face to, make me work harder. So basically tried to work me to death.